Hello, welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper of the 61st District in Montgomery County. The idea for today's program came to me as I was reading through a newsletter from the House Archives, the group charged with preserving historic documents, photos, and artifacts for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. The newsletter contained an article with reference tips for preserving your own items so you can document your own family history and save other items that have special value to you and maybe future generations. Joining me today is Jesse Teitelbaum, research analyst from the House Archives. In addition to personal archiving tips, Jesse's here to tell us about the role of the House Archives, some of the interesting things that they have preserved through its history. Jesse, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me.
First thing I'd like to do is to introduce you to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself. So, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? How did you get this job?
I'm originally from Mountaintop, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Wilkes-Barre in Luzerne County. Born and raised there, and went to school in Wilkes-Barre at King's College with a degree in history. After that, I pursued a master's degree in American history from the University of Scranton. From there, I worked at the Luzerne County Historical Society in Wilkes-Barre for about 14 years, prior to relocating in Harrisburg in 2008, where I started here in the House Archives.
So, how long's the House been around? I think I know the answer to this, but let's see if you do. And what kind of stuff do you have in the House Archives?
Well, I mean, the House, as we know it, started about 1790 when the General Assembly was split into two houses, the House and the Senate.
Well, some of us do count it from before the Revolution and Ben Franklin,
Absolutely.
but that's okay.
Absolutely. It does go back even further. The House Archives was founded around 1980 under the Bipartisan Management Committee to be responsible for collecting and preserving the committee records, the standing committee records of the House of Representatives. From there, the holdings grew to include a number of offices and agencies within the House, including the Speaker's office, the Chief Clerk's office, the Parliamentarian, and a few of the other legislative service agencies. In addition to that, the House Archives decided to start collecting personal papers of former members. After members left House, whether they retired or resigned, lost elections, we pursued them in trying to get them to donate their papers to us. A lot of them have and continue to do so. And so with all of these records, we then make them available to the public as a research facility.
Tell me some of the interesting things that you have in the House Archives.
Probably one of the more interesting items that we have is a large collection of photographs. We have a number of photographs, probably in the thousands, showcasing the history of the House as it progressed over the past decades.
Now, do they have captions? I've discovered in looking at my own family albums, who are these people? Well, that was your father when he was 5. Well, who are these other people? No one knows.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do have a lot of photographs that are unidentified, and what we try to do is go around to some of the longtime staffers that have been here to help try to identify not just members themselves, but we have a lot of the photographs have staff members as well, so we try to get as many identified as we can.
Okay. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is that you'd written an article about how people can archive their own things. And many of our viewers, I think, probably have maybe photographs, maybe diplomas from high school, maybe marriage certificates or other things. Right. What would you suggest to somebody who's interested in preserving things for the next generation, grandchildren, or what have you?
What we do at the House Archives, and which can be done at anyone's home, is the type of materials that we use to house the documents and photographs. Archival quality containers, another word for that is acid-free materials, folders, sleeves, boxes, are all made available to us, but they're also made available to the general public too.
These are special. Can you pick them up at an office supply store? Or?
I brought a couple to show, and they look like normal folders, they look like normal boxes, however they have stamps on them or stickers that indicate that they are acid-free or archival quality. And basically in the process of creating paper, pulp is naturally acidic. And it is this acid that eventually will deteriorate the document or paper that you have. And we've all seen papers that have yellowed, that have become brittle, that have basically fallen apart, and we've seen newspapers that have become yellow like this.
Sure.
And then what will happen is, over time, this newspaper, which is acidic in nature, will then damage what is around it. So for about 10 years, these two papers were together. And when I had recently separated them, you can see that
Newspaper bled onto the other one.
exactly. And this is what we call acid migration.
Okay.
The acidity from the newspaper eventually traveled to the paper that was next to it.
But many people do that. I mean, they put the newspaper article that came out when they got married next to the marriage certificate,
Right.
and it's in an envelope in a drawer somewhere.
Exactly, and we've seen it with a lot of people put these things in family Bibles or family books
Sure.
too. And so when you open it after 10 years, those pages are now yellow.
10 years? That fast?
That fast, especially with newspaper. Newspaper print is probably one of the worst types of paper in terms of longevity. Because so much of it is produced regularly, they had to use I don't want to say cheaper, but a
Sure.
less expensive way and a less
Comes in
expensive.
gigantic rolls.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
not Crane's stationery.
So it lasts a lot less than regular copy paper, and then of course acid-free paper. So what we do at the House Archives and what we recommend to people at home is, if you have the ability to photocopy the newspaper article onto either a regular piece of paper or especially onto an acid-free piece of paper, that will then last a lot longer.
Okay.
Unfortunately, not everyone has access to that, and some people do want to keep that newspaper as a memento itself. So our recommendation then is to keep it in an envelope by itself or a folder by itself, as opposed to putting it in between pages of a book or especially up against a photograph.
Well, people put it in pages of a book to keep it flat.
Yes, they do that too. And so you still can do that, but make sure that if you wanted to save those pages of that book, to have a buffer in between, whether it's in an envelope or in a folder by itself, or we even have what are called Mylar sleeves, which are a polyester plastic-based material, but these are acid-free and they are archivally safe. They prevent the acid migration from the document or photograph onto the pages itself.
So anybody could buy those sleeves?
Yes, it used to be that you could only get them through catalogs from archival supplies. But now almost any art supply store, even some of the larger department store chains, carry them in their office supply departments. And they're relatively inexpensive. They are a little bit more pricey than if you were just buying regular paper and regular manila folders, but in the long run, it's well worth it.
Now, talk to me about your day-to-day job at the archives. I mean, what do you do when you come in, get yourself a cup of coffee, then what do you do next?
The House Archives is responsible for a number of different projects. One of them, as I mentioned earlier, is we are the holders of all the committee records and all of the records from some of the other offices within the House. What we do as archivists is we catalog these records. That is, we remove them from the existing acidic containers into acid-free containers. We catalog them, we arrange them, we describe them, we prepare what's called a finding aid, which is basically like an index or an inventory to that collection.
Okay.
Make that available on our website to the public.
Well, and that prevents the problem in the end of the movie Indiana Jones, where there's a big warehouse someplace full of boxes and nobody even knows what's in them.
Exactly. And so what we try to do is to have these finding aids on our website down to the folder level, so a researcher searching a particular topic knows exactly where to find the specific item that they're looking for, and then we can pull it out.
So if a researcher, let's just say somebody trying to get their PhD or master's degree, was writing a paper on, I don't know, name somebody from Pennsylvania, they could come look. Does your website have that information?
No, our website will have indexes and
Okay.
inventories. Because of the amount of papers that we have, it's not very efficient for us to digitize everything.
Okay.
So what we do, however, is make available the lists of the items that we do have.
All right, let's say Boise Penrose. You know that name?
Mm-hmm.
Big statue of him
Yes.
on the Capitol grounds. Suppose somebody was writing their PhD master's or master's thesis on Boise Penrose, would they be able to use the archives to find out about him?
They would. We have a number of sources for biographical information in addition to legislative history. Unfortunately, we don't have everything on everyone, but we do have a number of resources. We have the Pennsylvania manuals, which include a lot of biographical material on former members. We also have the House journals and the Senate journals going back to about 1814, which would include a lot of the legislation that individual members were responsible for.
All right, now you're not the only archives in Harrisburg, are you?
Correct.
What's the other one?
We are very specific in what we collect, so we are the archives for the House of Representatives only. There is the Pennsylvania State Archives, which is also here in Harrisburg. They are under the governor's jurisdiction, so they are more or less the repository for the executive department.
And I've recently read that I think they have an original charter from William Penn or something like that.
They do. They have the original charter that King Charles II had given to William Penn in 1681. And they only bring it out once a year to display.
Now, as a former history major, I bet that's something of interest to you.
Oh, it is. I mean, I have been over to the State Archives and the State Museum many, many times to see their holdings, and I just find it fascinating, absolutely.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about people who want to preserve their own things. Let's say they have a number of, what about color photos? Do they tend to fade over time, and how would you preserve a color photograph?
Color photos, similar to other documents, yes, will also fade eventually if they are kept in an environment that is hazardous. And when I say hazardous, I don't mean,
How about a frame on your desk in the window? Is that hazardous?
Yeah, in the long run, yes. Unfortunately, there are a few things that are very detrimental to documents and photographs. UV light is the number one. If you have a photo, if you have even a textile in sunlight constantly, eventually that will fade. It will dry out and it will start to become brittle. And that's with any particular item, not just photos. But what a lot of organizations are doing, what a lot of individuals are doing now, are digitizing their images.
Right.
So one way to preserve the image itself, not the actual photograph, but the image itself, is to digitize that. And
when you say that, you mean put it on your computer?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Scan the computer in and get it, or scan the photo in and get it on your computer.
And save it that way?
Yes. There are a number of ways you can save a scanned in or a digitized photo. On your computer itself. You can then also put it onto a disk, a computer disk. You can also put it onto a jump drive. You can also save it onto what is now called the cloud, which is a network that is not necessarily on one individual computer.
Right, where you can retrieve it later, hopefully, if everything works right.
Exactly.
Okay, well, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. Legislative Report will return in just a minute. Stay with us.
Did you know that there are 6 ornate bronze chandeliers hanging in the House chamber? The 4 large chandeliers are estimated to weigh 3 tons each. Yet these iron and brass fixtures painted in 18-karat gold manage to dangle effortlessly. It takes 168 light bulbs to light the large chandeliers and 84 light bulbs on each of the smaller chandeliers. As you can imagine, changing the light bulbs when they burn out is far from easy. Workers must build scaffolding in order to reach their 1,450 light bulbs. Today, special, long-life, low-wattage energy-saving bulbs are used to lessen the amount of times that the light bulbs will need to be replaced. Now you know.
Did you know that Fort Indiantown Gap, located in Lebanon County, is home to Pennsylvania's only Veterans Memorial? C.J. Frederick of Westchester, Bucks County, submitted the winning design that now honors those men and women who have sacrificed their lives in defending this great country. Dedicated to the Commonwealth on October 7, 2001, the Veterans Memorial is surrounded by freestanding walls and houses an amphitheater, which can accommodate large crowds during an event. Strategically placed in the front of the amphitheater is a tomb that reminds visitors of those who gave their lives protecting the freedoms of this nation. The design suggests a war-damaged structure in which Frederick wanted to impress upon those visiting the horrific arena of war. Now you know. Did you know that on October 4th, 1911, the statues that greet visitors in front of the state capitol building in Harrisburg were dedicated to the citizens of the Commonwealth? In 1902, George Gray Bernard was commissioned to design the figures that embellish the front of the Capitol building. During the installation period, Bernard explained to the General Assembly what each sculpture symbolized. The Southern group, titled The Burden of Life, depicts the story of Adam and Eve followed by the fall of man in the forms of despair. The Northern group, titled Love and Labor, depicts male and female figures reaping fruits of labor and advances to a new Adam and Eve who gaze westward into the future. Recently, both sculptures underwent restoration to prevent further deterioration from their natural beauty. Now you know.
Welcome back to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. My guest today is Jesse Teitelbaum. Jesse is with the House Archives, and he's providing us tips on how to preserve the House's history as well as your personal history if you have papers or documents or photos that you'd like to save for your grandchildren or the future. So Jesse, let's talk about the big projects you're working on at the House Archives right now. Like, tell me a few things you've been working on recently.
We have two large projects that we're working on right now. One is our oral history program, which is an ongoing program where we interview former members of the House. It is an interview that's recorded here in Harrisburg at the Capitol. We record onto a DVD as well as an audio, and then we make a typed transcript available on our website. So far, since about 2004, we've conducted about 115 interviews of former members, which vary, in length. Some are as short as a half hour, some are as long as 2.5 hours.
Well, what do they talk about?
What's really nice about these interviews is that it gives a personal touch to life in the House of Representatives. It's not just what legislation that they had worked on, but we talk about camaraderie in the House. We talk about some projects that they did outside of session days. We just get their individual take on what it was like to be a member during the time they were in office.
Right. I'm hopeful that future people who do that and look back on the present time don't talk about the partisanship, which is unfortunately a part of our lives here many days in the House.
We try to give the members the opportunity to be as candid as they would like.
So
to
if
be,
that
sure.
was part of their lives, they're going to talk about that. I have to say, in deference to my colleagues, most of us get along on a personal basis,
of course.
on a human being, one human being working next to another. Talk to me about the kinds of books you have. I know maybe a year ago now, State Representative Dwight Evans from Philadelphia wrote a book, and do you have that book in your archives?
We do have that book. In fact, another one of the items that we try to collect are books written by or about members of the House. So there are some current members that are authors, Dwight Evans being one of them, Stephen Bloom being another one, that we try to collect their writings, as well as books that had been written in the past about members of the House. Going back to James Buchanan and even back as far as Ben Franklin, we try to collect those as well.
Well, some years ago, someone wrote a book about women in the House. I certainly hope you have that book.
We do have that, yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
Great. Good to hear. Let's talk a little bit more about what people can do if they want to leave behind them a record of their family or of their home or something like that. What would you recommend they do, and are there websites that they can go to get a little help?
Yes, I think one of the big things that they can do first is to try to collect as much information from living family members as they can. Before their family members die, try to collect all of that. Find out what they have in their holdings, whether it's photos, newspapers, or books, and try to get an inventory of everything. Once you get an inventory of everything, then you can sit down and try to arrange it in a particular order in which would be the most user-friendly for you and your family members. There is a website out there called Practical Archivist, which offers a lot of great basic tidbits on how to archive your family documents, and everything from photos to documents, newspapers, and everything in between.
Okay, it's called Practical Archivist?
Correct. Practicalarchivist.com is the
Okay.
website to go to, yes.
And are there other websites that people who are interested in this should visit?
Yes, the Society for American Archivists is the national organization that basically a lot of the individual archives refer to whenever they need help. So they're more of a professional organization. www.archivists.org is the website for the Society of American Archivists, and they offer great tidbits for a little bit more advanced archiving skills. And they also have a gift shop where you can purchase various books on how to do your family history, or how to archives, or how to collect archival materials in order to get them at home.
All right, I'm sitting here feeling worried. I had found some letters in an old family Bible that I have in an envelope. I should get them out and put them in a acid-free paper or something?
I would say yes. If you're looking at them and you're starting to feel worried about them, then now's the time to do that. Get them out of wherever they are. If they look like they're starting to fall apart, and try to get them at least into a safer environment, whether it's a folder or an envelope, something that will keep them flat and keep them safe and out of harm's way.
Okay, good. Now, do many people write their memoirs when they leave the house?
I wouldn't necessarily say many, but it is something that more and more members are getting interested in doing. And I think the oral history project that we've been doing is sparking a lot of members to do that.
All right, and have you been working on that? Are you doing the interviews or making up the questions?
Yes, the House Archives has about 7 staff members, and we all participate in some aspect of the oral history program, whether it's researching the questions or doing the interviews themselves. And so I have done a few of the interviews in the past, and I'm available to do some in the future as they start to come in.
Now, in my area, we did that with veterans.
Yes.
There was a veterans project where many veterans were interviewed and gave their opinions and thoughts and recollections, and many of them had amazingly vivid recollections of things like D-Day and stuff like that. So that was very interesting. Is that something also that people might want to do with their older family members?
I think that's a great idea. If you can record the personal stories from family members, from your neighbors, anybody really that's important in your life, that's probably the best way to remember them.
All right, now you were a history major and you have a master's?
A master's in history, yes.
Right, and now archiving's your life's work. Why is it important to do this? Why does it matter?
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
In my opinion, archiving, preserving documents, saving history, it shows what we were doing at the time that these documents were written. It's a documentary history of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. It's a documentary history of the Teitelbaum family. People can then go back to it at any time to refer to what was life like. What did somebody look like? How did they write? Centuries down the road, we can compare to what was happening now versus then and really get an interesting contrast on how things were different or how things were same even.
Are you your family's historian, or does somebody else have that role in the Teitelbaum clan?
Well, I'm one of 9 children, and so my older brother has actually taken that on. And so he's done a lot of research on not just my father's side, but my mother's side as well. So anything that I need to find, I can go right to him.
And I guess that's fun for the family when he can share the results of something that he's
Absolutely.
discovered or found or something like that.
It leads to family reunions. It leads to long-lost relatives. It's really great for every family.
Okay, so what kind of advice do you have for our audience today? You're an archivist for the Pennsylvania House, and there might be the archivists for their families. What would you tell them to do?
My first thing is to talk to everyone in your family. See what kind of stories they want to share. See what kind of documents they have. Get that all written down or get that all recorded before anyone else leaves the family, before anyone else dies. That's the first thing to do. To start to preserve your documents at home, make sure that everything is safe. Try not to handle things regularly because the oils in your fingers will eventually deteriorate the paper as well as UV light.
Framing it and hanging it up. You wouldn't recommend that?
Framing and hanging is fine, as long as it's in a safe environment. If you, like you mentioned before, if you have it in front of a window getting exposure to light, that will damage it eventually. If you have it in a room by itself, as long as you're not smoking cigars in front of it, or as long as you don't have it over a fireplace, it's going to stay safe and it will last long. So keeping it in a frame is fine because it'll also prevent continual handling of it as well. Acid-free materials are very important because that will extend the life of any kind of document. They can be pricey, especially if you have a large collection of documents. But if you buy a few here and there, that will help a lot in the long run. Also, identification. Photos, documents, try to identify as much as you can, because if you don't write that down and something happens, then you will lose all that information.
Right. I mean, think you have the pictures, you know who the people are.
Right.
But the people coming after you might not know
Exactly.
who they are. So they need
Names,
to,
places, dates.
and where it happened,
Right.
and what about it. Okay,
Exactly.
good. And you had said there were a couple projects you were working on in the house. What else can you share with us about what you've been doing at the house lately?
Our big project right now is our biographical database. We are trying to find a short biography as well as an image of every single member who has passed through the house. And it's thousands.
I'm sure it is. Some
Thousands.
people only last one term.
Right. All of these are now available on our website going back to 1930. So you can search on the house's website. You will be able to find an image as well as a short biography of every member back to 1930. We're in the process of continuing to go back, and so every time we do a decade, we're going to be adding them onto our website.
Okay. And that would be under BMC, Bipartisan Management Committee.
Correct, correct.
It's a nonpartisan archive, and it's a nonpartisan activity, right?
Yes. The House Archives works under the Chief Clerk's Office through the Bipartisan Management Committee. house.state.pa.us/BMC/archives.
Okay, so that's great. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today's program. My guest today has been Jesse Teitelbaum, and we've been talking about the House Archives and archiving your personal documents so that your family has those things for the future. And I'm State Representative Kate Harper. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my Bluebell office. The address and phone number will be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching. Please join me again for Legislative Report.